Welcome back to Less Heresy Than Expected. This channel reconciles the divide that modernity would like to keep separate, like your body and your soul, neuroscience and early church, theology and psychology. Today, an endocrinologist and a theologian show how caring for your dopamine and hormones are crucial to the spiritual life. Enjoy.
I am not the urge. I'm a healthy, dispassionate observer.
I don't believe that depression is a disease. I think depression is a constellation of symptoms.
Humanity is meant to integrate and combine and bring together, to unify all of creation.
And when you replace the testosterone without need for any other treatment for depression, the depression resolves.
And is morally compromised in some way, scripturally speaking and spiritually speaking, they are still in the image of God.
I mean, I tend to think we are two different species. We are just made to...
Welcome back. Today we are joined again with Dr. Nargess Kaviani, and we are continuing our discussion on dopamine and other sort of neuroreceptors and neurotransmitters. Yes. Could you tell us a little bit about why you chose this field of medicine?
Excellent question. So when I was 7 years old, I have a cousin. She's just 2 months older than me. And she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And at that point, we didn't have the technology that we have now, the advanced technology. So I remember that she had to modify her eating. And in Persian culture, we eat a lot of rice. So she was no longer be able to eat much rice. Also, my aunt, whenever needed to give her an injection, used very big syringes with needles. Because that's what was available at that point. We're talking about like 40 years ago almost. And my cousin would run away. My aunt would take her. I would sit behind the furniture and looking at what's going on and thinking to myself, I'm going to do one day something about this and make it better. So I've had that fascination with endocrinology since 7 years old. And right now we're actually quite close to be able to give people with type 1 diabetes the best treatment we have had in the past century, actually, with a closed loop delivery system we have available.
Okay, that sort of leans into a question I was going to ask you. What has been the most innovative medicine that endocrinology has developed in the last 40 years?
I would say actually it's not a medicine, it's a delivery system for insulin. And so we have right now closed loop system, which means the patient would have a sensor on that would detect their level of blood glucose. It's actually not blood glucose, it's the interstitial fluid glucose level, which is very close to blood glucose. And the sensors we have, like some of them can be kept up to 3 weeks now, so you don't need to change it. Basically, it means you just get one needle stick for 3 weeks, which is quite an advancement. We used to have the patient to check their finger stick at least 3 or 4 times a day. And then that sensor basically connects through Bluetooth with an insulin pump, which is a reservoir again that could be filled with a large amount of insulin and could automatically deliver the amount of insulin that the patient needs. Mm-hmm. So before, the patient had to give themselves multiple injections a day for delivery, but now basically with one pump, and the pump could be kept refilled. Mm-hmm. So it is much less pain, much better estimation of how much insulin they need, and just the ease of delivery. And also you can set up the pump to give the patient an alert when the blood sugar is low, because majority of people are very worried about high blood sugar. For us as endocrinologists, the low blood sugar has much higher impact on the patient because it's a severe stress, and a lot of patients with type 1 diabetes develop what we call it hypoglycemia unawareness, meaning because they have had repeated low blood sugar, their body is not as sensitive anymore, and over time cannot detect that they have low blood sugar. So imagine this person is driving and they have a low blood sugar. If they can't actually even sense it, they may lose consciousness behind the wheel. That can be a disaster, resulting even death. But now, because of the technology we have, the sensor would pick up the low blood sugar and automatically tell the pump to stop delivery of the insulin, and basically adjust for the low blood sugar, and also give an alarm to the patient to make them aware to actually take a snack to correct for the low blood sugar. So it's a huge advancement we have had in the delivery of the insulin.
Thank you. One of the things that you touched on in what you were saying is that there's an awareness that the patient needs to have of their glucose levels, whether it's too high or whether it's too low. I was unaware that there's this ability with chronic low blood sugar that a person becomes unaware of that. So I am type 2, and this is called wrong arm, continuous glucose monitor.
Right. Yeah, or sensor, the same thing.
Continuous glucose monitor. I usually have it here.
Right.
And I switch it accordingly, and it lasts for 15 days, so 3 weeks. Dr. Nargess is a doctor. She's not my doctor. So we're maintaining a good friendship there. And I have, just as she said, on my phone, I have a monitor that shows me my levels of glucose during the day. And there's different types of devices where when I first started, which was maybe last year, I think, I would have to scan it manually every 8 hours or so.
Right.
This one lasts for 15 days. And I think it's very useful because it shows the trend of how your body reacts in blood sugar according to what type of food you eat. So I don't eat rice very much because it's high in carbs, and blood sugar just goes sky high. And that's a very useful tool to be aware of what your current blood sugar is. Now let me parallel that question with a similar question to the profession itself. Apart from the technology or medicine that endocrinology is using, what's the most important thing that endocrinology has learned? If we're talking about awareness, patient being aware of their own blood sugar, what is, in your opinion, the most important thing that endocrinology has discovered?
So in regard to diabetes or any type of endocrine issues?
Any type of issue, yes.
Okay, so I think one of the things we have learned actually and really have improved on is how much impact the hormones have on the strength of the bone and bone formation, even in men. We always knew that women have issues with decreased bone density or how strong their bone is after they go through menopause, because their basically estrogen, progesterone stops being produced. But we know actually men go through similar changes in their hormone production. It's called andropause, which happens quite later than when it happens in women. And we used to not necessarily screen for osteoporosis in men, but now it is recommended based on current guidelines to screen men 70 and above, unless, we know that they have some issues. Some patients have a specific clinical presentation, we screen them sooner, but otherwise every healthy man who is 70 needs to be screened for osteoporosis. because that's when the amount of testosterone they are making is not any longer enough to keep their bone healthy. So we screen, and the screening is for conditions that we can actually do something about it to prevent further problems. So if we actually somebody who's 70 screens positive, a man screen positive, then we can treat them for osteoporosis before they present with a fracture that a lot of times in our elderly, unfortunately, a pelvic fracture could result in severe disability or even death, pending the other medical conditions that the patients have.
Right. And then once someone breaks a hip or a bone, then, therapy is involved. And I've known people who have had issues like that and didn't receive the type of physical therapy that they needed. And they maintained the limp, thereafter. And then obviously the state and affordability, the accessibility of medicine for some people. I've known someone who has had a hip fracture or broken their hip, and they had the therapy and they were walking completely fine. So it's these different areas of medicine are cooperating with each other and learning from each other.
Right.
As those of us who are, on this side of the medical field, we know how important it is that our doctors talk to each other and communicate. And sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't.
We have a joke in medicine and medical field. We say if you have 100 doctors and present same patients to them, they come with 100 different diagnoses. And the reason being is medicine is a different science than all other science. Your expertise, your biases as a human being, your experiences in life impacts how you make the diagnosis and what you focus on. So it's like, and generally speaking, the older physicians are much better diagnosticians because back when they were starting to practice, there was not a lot of testing. So they basically make the diagnosis by just looking at the patient and the history, which is the proper way of making diagnosis. And going back, I wanted to add a comment here. So we were talking about hypoglycemia unawareness. So I wanted to bring it back to dopamine as well. So our body is actually very flexible and smart and adjusts with what we expose the body to. So similar to hypoglycemia unawareness, when the patient has repeated low blood sugar, and low blood sugar at the beginning causes the change in mental status, causes shakiness, feeling of heart rate increasing, blood pressure rising because it's a stress, and gradually body gets adjusted to it over the time of decades, actually. And the same thing happens for dopamine. So our body produces the dopamine, but if you are, let's say, scrolling and keep getting bursts of dopamine, it gets adjusted to high level of dopamine, and that's why you don't have the pleasure. Like you may, at the beginning, the first few minutes that when you scroll, you really enjoy what you're watching, but then you get actually desensitized about the impact of dopamine. So it's very similar concept.
That's very good, and I think that will come into play in our conversation today as we progress through into the example questions for our survey on this topic, and we'll contain ourselves to that for this episode. And then, assuming we make it that far, the producer is not so happy about me just kind of having these free flow questions and not sticking to them. You say, no, keep doing what you're doing. But you brought it back to dopamine. So let's talk about this. And we started this time together with a basic statement that was a description of these neurotransmitters that was included in the survey. And the statement goes like this, and it contains examples of several of them. A healthy life pursues the right things, dopamine. Is at peace with enough, serotonin. Doesn't panic under pressure, GABA. Forms deep relationships and stays faithful to them, oxytocin and vasopressin. Grows through experience, glutamate. And recovers after stress or failure, and that is endocannabinoids. I'll get it right one of these days. So when we talked about this last time, I shared that I wasn't as familiar with GABA and glutamate, but I've come to find that they're related, and that glutamate is a precursor to GABA, and they sort of have a balancing effect. Can you talk about that just very briefly, and then we'll go into a review of the questions?
I mean, I would love to, but it's not in my expertise.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
I'm going to not make a comment yet. If
Okay.
you want me, I can look into it.
Okay.
But it is not something that an endocrinologist necessarily work on. So
Okay, so now I'm fascinated. Now I'm fascinated, and I have more questions. Okay, so the GABA and the glutamate is not in the endocrine system. Okay,
so
what
it's
is
usually the
exactly?
neurologist. Neurologists are the
Okay.
one who work with them because they are neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters are chemicals that basically connects the neurons, right?
Okay.
So our cells, different type of cells need to connect together. So the neurotransmitter means the message from a neurons gets transmitted to another neuron, right?
Right.
So it's usually in our brain. But hormone, and endocrinologist works with hormones. And hormones are chemicals that are produced and directly go into our blood cells, blood flow, and get transferred to another organ.
Okay.
And so it's not necessarily just into the brain. So some neurotransmitters like dopamine are hormones as well.
Okay.
So they are not only in the gap between the neurons and that connects the neurons, they also go to different organs through the blood system. So that's why dopamine is a neuroendocrine hormone. Meaning it starts from the nerves, it's produced in the nerves in our brain, but its impact is actually throughout our whole system. But that's not how GABA works. Because GABA is usually produced in the brain and it impacts just our nervous system. And that is not my expertise.
And the same thing with glutamate?
Glutamate is the precursor of the GABA, right?
Okay, so I got that.
Right.
All right, so now we need to find a neurologist.
Right.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I'll be happy to do research and get back to you on that, but this is not something I deal with on a regular basis.
And so endocannabinoids, those are hormones as well, or?
No. Again, neurologists and psychologists work on those. Psychiatrists and psychologists.
All right, so this is the interesting aspect of the conversation, is because we have to touch on several different disciplines.
Right.
You mentioned psychology. I'm approaching my view not only in theology but psychology as well. And I'm learning more and more. And even in the statement that I just read, it needs to be modified if we're talking to an endocrinologist. Very good.
And that's why we actually, in medicine, we call it a multidisciplinary team, meaning and that's the team need to communicate together to find out what is the best solution for an individual. And that's why we have multiple specialties in medicine, because our body is just fascinating, and really one physician cannot be the master in all over the body. But generally, primary care physicians are the one who are we call them the captain of the ship, meaning they may consult me, they may consult a neurologist, they may consult a psychiatrist, in taking care of their patient, and then they put all this consultation together and come up with a master plan for their patients. That's why it's very important to check in regularly with your primary care.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Maybe I need to modify this statement for the next episode, but that is... I'm enjoying this process because I'm learning stuff, and that's the whole point of the conversation, to inform us and to inform those who are listening. So I hope, you're sticking with us. So we had a series of questions that I want to just briefly touch on and sort of touch on some of the things that we discussed, and then we'll get into the new content. So we had the overriding question of what is dopamine and what is its function in the body. And we also discuss along with that the issues of reward and motivation.
Right.
And I don't know if this will make the cut in the actual episode, but Dr. Danny Kaviani, with his who is Nargiss's pet, and has an honorary doctorate in endocrinology, gave us an example of anticipation,
Right.
and where our attention is going. And so dopamine has its effects on our anticipation, what we pursue, and also with reinforcing learning. So with pet training, dopamine is very important in understanding how that works. We also talked about how dopamine is related to working memory. And so there's a connection with Parkinson's to some degree that we talked about. Motor control is in that as well. We see that dopamine is a regulator of motivation, behavioral learning, and it also is a hormone regulator itself. Could you talk just very briefly about how dopamine is a hormone regulator?
Absolutely. So two major hormones that the dopamine interacts with is one is prolactin. Prolactin is produced in our pituitary gland, and it's in charge of producing milk, so the breast milk. And the dopamine and prolactin have reverse interactions, meaning when the dopamine goes up, prolactin goes down. When the prolactin goes up, dopamine goes down. So in clinical practice, usually when you find what happens is a person comes in with production of milk, regardless of their pregnancy state. So, because we expect a pregnant woman to start producing milk at the end of their pregnancy, so to breastfeed. But if a regular woman who is not pregnant or a man comes with milky discharge, then that's when the prolactin is usually elevated due to a tumor in their pituitary gland. And the treatment for that condition is actually giving them what we call bromocriptine, the medication called bromocriptine, which is actually a dopamine agonist. So because the dopamine and prolactin have reverse interaction. So that's one hormone that dopamine interact with. Another one is testosterone. So they also have reverse interactions, meaning dopamine increases, testosterone goes down. Testosterone, and the way that it works is dopamine regulates what we call it GnRH, which is a gonadotropin releasing hormone that comes from your hypothalamus. It impacts the production of LH, which is from pituitary gland, and the LH impacts the testicles to produce testosterone. So any interruption in this, basically in this circle, results the change in the testosterone. When the testosterone is produced, it sends a negative signal to hypothalamus to stop producing a lot of GnRH anymore. So that's how they adjust the production of it. So that's another thing that dopamine impacts. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. So as we're bringing psychology and theology into this conversation, we understand that dopamine is basically the structure, the biological and chemical structure through which our attention focuses itself. It does not decide for us what is worthy of our attention or our pursuit or our motivation. It simply amplifies what we pay attention to. And so there also has to be prefrontal cortex, there has to be spiritual training, a faith context for dopamine to function correctly. And remember, we are wanting, as a theologian with a psychological, emphasis, and as a medical doctor and endocrinologist, we are wanting people to make healthy choices to live the good life. And dopamine is a very important part of this, and this is why we're having this conversation. So what we don't want is overstimulation, which you mentioned earlier.
Right.
And so if dopamine is out of control, that leads to other problems as well.
And to add to that, so dopamine, one of the things that dopamine does is basically reward expectation, meaning you expect to receive the reward. So it's not receiving the reward, it's how you expect to receive the reward. And when you get the reward, the brain actually looks into, is this reward worth it or not worth it? Depends on how it answers the question, that it impacts the amount of dopamine you keep producing. So that's why one of the things we can focus on is delayed gratification. And that is like a muscle that you need to train. So I actually just looked into how we can train this muscle before the recording this podcast. And it takes practice. So it takes practice, meaning, like, for example, I like tea, right? So if I tell myself, okay, Nargis, let's do 1 hour of focus work, then you can make yourself a nice cup of hot tea of your choice. That makes me to stay very focused during that 1 hour of work because I'm expecting to get the reward, which is my tea, right? So my focus actually increases because my dopamine increases, keep expecting that I'm getting closer and closer to my reward. However, if I actually serve myself the tea at the beginning of the activity, I lose that expectation. So my dopamine doesn't keep increasing. I'm losing that expectation. So looking into, there are many different things that are related to delayed gratification, like building a career. So when you build a career, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, day in and day out. You need to keep going and showing up, going and showing up. And then you actually expect to have the reward of having a nice career, having good income, being able, some people want to like do different activities, having different funds. Some people want to build a family and they are having income for that. The same thing as spiritual practices. So to be a spiritual person, it's not like, oh, you open the Bible one time, like in a year, and you read one like chapter, and now you're a spiritual person. It takes practice and consistency, and keep building that muscle, and keep delaying the gratification, like going back to the principles of, okay, like what does this book tell me? How do I need to adjust my behavior, my actions to get to that gratification of being a spiritual person? So it takes usually at least few weeks of practice of delayed gratification to start impacting the dopamine level, and to actually impact it long term, it takes up to months of delayed gratification. I'll give you an example of actually a study they did in a long-term study they did on kids. So these kids were in elementary school and they offered them marshmallows. So they said, they give them each one marshmallow. They said, if you eat this marshmallow now, that's the only marshmallow you're getting. But if you wait, I don't remember exactly, like 5-10 minutes, you actually can have a bunch of marshmallows. So the few kids who waited for the few marshmallows to come, when they studied them long term, in life they were much more successful because they were practicing delayed gratification for a bigger reward from the very young age. So they actually tended to have much better career, much better family life, and less criminal activity as adults. And this is a fascinating actually study to look into. I will look and find basically the link to this study if our audience wanted to look at it, and we can put it in the notes for the podcast.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that we've also talked about is that in endocrinology, psychology, and theology, we all want to help the person achieve and go in the direction of what is good and healthy in life. And
long term,
yes, long term. So, theologically speaking, spiritually speaking, is when we have passions that are disordered, or when we have hormones that are dysregulated. We want to, what sort of practices can we use to return and recover a homeostasis, sorry. And you mentioned vocation is a way to regulate these things. You also mentioned relational aspects, so being in a community is really important. And as I was driving here for this interview, I was driving along, and I happened to see the car beside me, the passenger, and you've all seen this before. The person is looking down, and you know instantly what they're doing.
Right.
They're on their phone.
Right.
And sometimes you see drivers doing that as well.
Right.
You know, not just the passengers. And I thought, what a curious thing, a visual cue of this inability that we have to be silent and to be just to look and stare around at what is around us, to be situationally aware. And I thought, you know, in a previous era, 30, 40, 50 years ago, when someone was looking down, what would you think that they're doing? Meditating, contemplating, praying, you know, which is a form of worship. And so contemplation is another one of those things that is a very good dopamine regulator. And one of my thoughts is, as long as we are controlled and attached to our cell phones, it's going to be extremely difficult, I think, impossible. I think a major change has to happen. How that happens, I don't know. But as so many people have talked about, Anna Lemke and Jonathan Haidt and other people, the Huberman Show, you know, these dopamine issues that we have with our phones is absolutely critical, and one is interrupting the spiritual life of another person. So,
and one observation I actually had, Jeremy, was I always pass multiple bus stations when I go out, and I looked and I saw all the students who go to Penn State University and waiting for their bus. They actually, everybody looking at a phone. There is no communication. Like, there's a bunch of them standing next to each other. Everybody is looking at their phone. When we were kids, we were waiting for bus. We start communicating. We start connecting as human beings. And human connection is totally different, and how it actually changed your brain chemistry than connection with a phone. This is a fake connection we have with our phone, but our brain doesn't realize it. So we basically do not produce any type of oxytocin when we are connected with a phone, but with a human being, when you interact, actually you start producing more oxytocin because there is real connection. So that is something, and to be aware of also how to adjust it. It takes discipline. I have seen many families as young as the kids is 1 year old when they expose them to a screen. That should not happen, but that's constantly happening. My own child, she's 16 years old. We never got her any type of device till she was 11. And you actually see how she interacts with her phone compared to her peers. She is not attached to that phone. You can have her for 5 hours be in a party without even looking at the phone. But all her peers, they are so attached to the phone that it's very hard. Like, you gotta kind of tell them, okay, we're having food. Could you put aside the phone? It comes to awareness and taking the proper behavior and action to adjust for it.
Sorry. That'll be edited out. So our next question that we briefly discussed was, if dopamine drives motivation, how do we distinguish healthy desire from compulsive craving biologically and spiritually? So this is rolling off of the point that you just made. So medically speaking, how do we distinguish a healthy desire from a compulsive craving?
So a healthy desire, actually, there are few components we could look at. One is a healthy desire does not look to, it doesn't have urgency in it. Meaning you can actually wait and have patience and delayed gratification. With the craving, you actually are nervous to find and gratify that craving right away. And another thing is the amount of dopamine that's basically biologically released with a healthy desire. Let's say we talked about like building a career, right? So your dopamine during the day constantly gets released with different activities you do in very little tiny amounts. With a craving, when you fulfill that craving, let's say in a substance abuse case, when you fulfill and you have a bunch of dopamine released very quickly, and then you have a deep down of the dopamine. So after you have a healthy desire fulfilled, for example, you make a party and you are satisfied with the party, you sit down and contemplate on how the party went, what type of talks you had with your friends, how was the food. The amount of satisfaction you have is much longer, lasts much longer compared to just a craving being fulfilled. For example, if you crave for a food, like you eat 3-4 donuts right away, like you have a joy and actually increase in that your serotonin level right away, but then you feel very groggy, you feel like very full, you want to just take a nap right away. So the feeling that your body has afterward is much less satisfying.
So as someone in Danny's here, he's having a good time. Do you want to?
He just wants to go in.
Oh, okay.
Right. Let me get the door for him. You want that? Here.
Hey, good boy. Go take a nap.
Good.
So I would respond to what you're saying there is that if it's a compulsion, there is a narrowing and an over-identification where the person actually becomes the urge and they cannot separate themselves from the desire, from the urge. If it's a healthy thing, it's broader and it's more inclusive. It involves community. And there's also this awareness of, in psychological terms, who I am. I am not the urge. I'm a healthy, dispassionate observer that is aware of the situation. And I know a lot of people can relate to this, where something happens, someone says a word that's unkind, and you focus on that. All of a sudden you can't think of anything else, and falling in love would be that way as well.
Right.
So
Right.
another aspect of endocrinology and spirituality and psychology is there's a healthy aspect, there's an unhealthy aspect. So dopamine can be very, very healthy in the same way that cortisol is extremely healthy when someone needs to focus. They're in danger and they need to fight. But then also there needs to be these hormones that help us to come back to homeostasis, where we're just sort of calm down and we're self-regulated in the best possible way. So I would say that spiritually speaking, I maintain an awareness of myself. I maintain awareness of what is good and beneficial, and also where I'm going. My grandmother used to say, remember who you are, who you belong to, and where you're going. And all those things require this healthy balance of hormones and relationships as well, and vocation and
Right.
contemplation.
So in other words, don't lose your identity and control
Exactly.
when you're satisfying an urge.
Yeah, exactly. So then we talked about attention practices as well that are involved with that, and we're saying that dopamine should be in service of our good, as opposed to us being used by a system such as a cell phone or such as a slot machine, the constant scrolling and getting dopamine hits. And then also being able to successfully regulate through discipline and through delay of gratification. If you can't do that, then it's a compulsion, and there's systems in place to help with that. The next question that we had was, at what point does addiction compromise moral responsibility, and how do medicine and theology draw that line differently?
So I would have you go first, because about this
yes.
morality.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I think it's like, the way I would say this is, it's not that we never have any agency at all. It's that our agency has been compromised, and that we are unclear on these specifics that I just talked about. What happens is we take something that is good, maybe partially good, and we make it the ultimate thing. So we want that dopamine hit. We want that thrill that comes from the excitement that happens in our lives, whatever agitates us in a good way. And I would say that addiction involves this unhealthy identification where I become a compensator. So I'm using dopamine for soothing in a way that's unhealthy, or I've been wounded and I've been hurt. So I experience, and I crave dopamine in a way that is unhealthy. I would say responsibility is tied to my ability to give consent with that which I am working with in this situation. So what is my moral responsibility to speak up and defend someone who is being wounded? I need to be able to make judgments in that moment. So there's prefrontal, operation there to say, hey, this is something that's worthy of my attention in this moment. And if I'm functioning neurochemically in an ideal or an optimal state, or at least in a reasonable, healthy state, then all of my other faculties can line up with what is needed in that moment. Fight or flight, in a healthy way to defend someone, or even to defend myself. I can't just, sit there and take it. So I have some sort of moral responsibility to myself and my own good as well. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. What are your thoughts?
So I would say, in medicine, the morality is basically related to cultural aspects, the person's value and beliefs. So we tend to, I would say, not because everybody comes from different walks of life. So we have general framework for what morality is, but I would say addiction, when any type of activity or using any substance interferes with the regular daily function of any individual, that is an addiction. For example, if we know a parent is supposed to feed their children healthy food, right? So, and educate themselves how to actually what healthy food is and provide for them. If a parent every night is feeding the kids like pizza or sausage, for example, and instead spending time scrolling, that scrolling interferes with the responsibility of them, because it's every night. I'm not saying just one night in blue moon. It's consistently you're skipping your responsibility and putting your time and energy and effort on some other type of activity. It could be substance use. It could be relation that you have with another human being. It could be using your devices or playing video games, anything that interferes with your regular daily function and responsibility and you lose control of doing that, that's considered an addiction.
Right, and it's the loss of control despite the harm that's happening.
Right, exactly.
Right, and
right.
so if I'm needing to go to bed at 11 o'clock, and I get on my phone, and suddenly it's 12 or 12:30. There's neurochemical harm that will happen to me as I'm not getting sleep and not getting rested, and that's a very, very mild example, but the moral responsibility, I think, from my perspective, comes back to it. Have I lost control, or is my agency compromised so that my behaviors and even relationships perhaps are something that is harmful to me and sort of distracting me from that ultimate goal, that pursuit of the ultimate good. And the other thing I wanted to say is, and this is important to remember from the theological aspect, is that even if someone is struggling with control issues, with agency issues, and is morally compromised in some way, scripturally speaking and spiritually speaking, they are still in the image of God. Despite what the behavior is, we all have human value. We all continue to function medically and biologically, and so we don't lose that aspect. But spiritually speaking, we remain in the image of God, and there is always the potentiality in the design, even though it may be mitigated by other factors. So.
Very well.
Yeah, let's move on to the next thing. And you've already touched on some of this already, so we may not need to talk about this too much. The next question was, does constant dopamine stimulation reshape our capacity for attention, prayer, or contemplation?
As we said, absolutely,
Yeah.
right? Because the amount of the dopamine is produced in our body would decrease if we have activities that results in spikes of dopamine and loss of the dopamine. And for focus, any type of focused activity like contemplation, you need to have constant release of dopamine to stay focused. So it basically compromises our focus.
I would say something here that I thought was pretty interesting as I was working towards this. We have this need, when we talk about contemplation and its place in meditation, is that the issues with dysregulated dopamine, it affects our ability to have depth endurance, to stay in that spot. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about the ability to have delayed gratification. You're anticipating your tea, in that instance, but you're not exactly rewarding yourself with that at the very beginning. And I thought that was very interesting as well. What sort of discipline you could bring into your life, whether it's a prayer life, whether it's, working out or something like that, what sort of good dopamine reward would there be that you can delay? You have tea here, which is delicious as well. Thank you very much. You also have cookies, which I will have a taste of at the end of this interview. So I'm delaying that as well, which is really important. So this aspect of what does it look like to live in the ability to integrate all these things as well. And spiritually speaking, we see that humankind is intended from the very beginning to be good stewards of all these things. And that includes relationships, that includes how we treat the environment, how we treat nature, animals. And it's like, if we can be present to ourselves, regulate our desires, give ourselves space, and not be so narrowly focused, we can have a wider vision. We can endure things with depth. And then there's one last thing that I wanted to bring into this, and it was that how would you pitch someone the need to be aware of how dopamine works in their body and present it in a way that it's not repressive, but something that is actually like a retraining. So what I would say is, like, in a spiritual practice, I would say don't think of, obeying these commandments, as it were, as something that's oppressive. Use it as a way to retrain your understanding of what's good and what's worthy of pursuit. How would you sort of mediate that for someone who is needing to focus on their dopamine levels?
So, for example, so I would say, like, let's say I see quite a lot of diabetic patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with the diabetes, one major component of adjustment that the patient needs to do is adjusting their dietary habits, right? So if you just give them a recipe of eat this, not eat that, that's not going to work. So, and I learned that by the hard way. So what I do with my patients now is I ask them, what are you looking forward to do? If they have, let's say, children, let's say, what are you looking to do regarding your children? So if they have younger children, a lot of times they say, okay, we want to like see them graduate, we want to see them get married, we want to like see our grandchildren. They'll say, okay, so to get to that goal, which is a long-term goal, then if you modify your eating habits, the likelihood of you making it that long and live that long to actually achieve that thing that's valuable to you increases significantly. However, if you continue eating the way you are eating, then you may not actually see these milestones in the life of your children. So you always need to work with the individual and see what is their own personal value and how they how they come up with their value system. And then you empower them based on something that's valuable to them, how to adjust. And the adjustment always needs to be progressive, not abrupt. Because if you want to all of the sudden, it works throughout the life. If you want to all of the sudden make everything upside down, the person gets scared and would not be able to basically follow what they need to follow. But if you actually give the control to them and make them feel that they are choosing the choices that's available to them and they are in control, which is the truth. Because I mean, I may ask my patient to do something, I can't do it for them. They need to do it. So I always give them choice and say, which one do you want to start with? And then you gotta keep giving them enough time to make this a habit. Different studies have shown different things, but they say at least you need at least 21 days of consistently changing something to consider that as habit. So if, let's say, if I have someone who eats 90% of their meal is carbohydrate, which increases their blood sugar, I would start saying, how can we just change that 5%? So instead of like 85%, can we go to 80%? So one small step, and then you keep building and you keep celebrating when you have achievement. You see, I have this basically calendar behind Jeremy. So I actually, like, if I'm achieving a goal, I give myself a stars. Then at the end of the month, I actually see how many stars I got. So, and that actually is my reward system for myself to be able to keep contemplating, oh, I did go to the gym this week as well, 3 times that I promised. Great job. And then I may actually get myself a small cappuccino, which is my favorite drink, to from the cafe that I like, to celebrate that week achievement. So it is basically a practice. That was my point. It's a practice. It's consistency to keep building new habits. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. And I think also just in our modern world where everything is surrounded by this device that we have, and it is in a way intangible. I mean, we're looking at a screen that changes and is never there. the display is never there in a solid way. Like we're never seeing that, screen like we see this calendar there.
Right.
I think another very important aspect of this retraining and training is to have something that's tangible, something that's in our hand. Either it's a journal,
Right.
or a calendar, or some sort of reward system that is noticeable. I know of various types of techniques for that for different reasons.
Very important.
All right, so let's see. The last thing we talked about was testosterone. That was the last thing we got to last time.
Do you have the question number?
Yeah,
Jeremy?
it's number 4.
Number
How
4?
how do declining testosterone levels in men? So let's just review this a little bit. I forget exactly what we covered on this question. So the next question that we had in the example questions was, how do declining testosterone levels in men affect motivation, depression, spiritual vitality, and community participation? You've already mentioned the effect of bone density and
Right.
testosterone in men, and that was something I was not aware of. And now we're talking a little bit more of the psychological effects of a lack of testosterone and declining testosterone.
Sure.
What's happening there, endocrinology and wise?
So as we said earlier, the testosterone, how it is produces in your hypothalamus, you produce GnRH, which is gonadotropin releasing hormone that impacts the pituitary gland, which produces LH, and the LH impacts the testicles to produce testosterone. Testosterone impacts the drive in men, and and also because it has positive impact in dopamine and increases the dopamine level. So if the testosterone level is declined for whatever reason, there could be many different reasons for the decrease of that, then the dopamine decreases as well, and it causes what we call it anhedonia, meaning the person does not have any joy from the activities that used to be joyful to that person. It's one of the hallmarks of depression, and also decreased motivation, decreased drive, and decreased strength. So any man who presents with depression, as a screening test, we generally check their testosterone level as well. And sometimes we find that they actually have hypogonadism or decreased testosterone production. And when you replace the testosterone without need for any other treatment for depression, the depression resolves.
So, generally stated, how would a man know that his testosterone is declining?
Okay, so testosterone has multiple impacts in a male function. So one of the major functions everybody knows in their sexual performance. So if a otherwise healthy man who has never had any issue with erectile dysfunction or a problem with the sexual performance, if they all of a sudden they start having trouble then that's one reason to look into the testosterone. Another thing is if a man who is quite functional start having change in their function, change in their memory, change in their daily abilities, performing, going to the gym when like they used to go to the gym regularly. Now they cannot lift as much as they used to. That's another reason to check that. As we said, any type of mood disorders that comes up, we check their testosterone level. And I guess that's generally the symptoms that you could see. Also, change in hair growth. So, men who have hair loss, we always check their testosterone level. That could be one of the other symptoms for testosterone, or if they have change in the growth of their beard or mustaches, also testosterone needs to be checked.
As I was preparing for this series that we're doing now, because it's going to be multiple episodes, and you're very gracious, and
Absolutely.
I stated to you before we even started filming that I've discovered how important sleep is during this time as well. Is there a connection between declining testosterone and sleep?
Testosterone and sleep. So, excellent question. I wouldn't say there's a specific, like studies may have been done on that, but one of the things we know is one of the major pillars of well-being in any human being is sleep. In the Western society, we are so focused on productivity that we forget actually great sleep is directly related to our productivity. There has been multiple studies done in different countries when they actually have 4-day work or they have 6 hours work days, and the amount of productivity in those nations increases significantly. Like one example would be Sweden, that they actually work in a year. Their system is built based on a 6 hours day, so they work 132 hours less compared to the general average population at work. And from the productivity standpoint, they are one of the highest nations in the whole world, despite decreasing their work hours. And I mean, I need to look into it, but I would say generally speaking, because decreased sleep is interpreted in our brain as a stress, the cortisol level usually increases. You would have chronic cortisol elevation. And despite what we think that if tonight, let's say I slept only 4 hours, I could, the next night, I can add 2 additional hours, and in 2 nights, I can basically compensate for lack of sleep. That's not how it works, actually. For every 1 hour of sleep we lose, it takes 1 week for our body chemistry to adjust. So, if you actually have a sleep debt of 4 hours, it takes up to a month for your body chemistry to adjust. So if you have multiple decreased sleep nights, then it functions, it actually impacts the biochemistry of your system. And when the cortisol level increases, it actually has a reverse impact on testosterone. So the higher is the cortisol, the lower is the testosterone. Going back to what we said, autonomic system, like sympathetic nervous system. So when you are in danger, you're not going to reproduce. So the danger means your muscle needs to work hard, your heart rate needs to go up, your blood pressure needs to go up so you can run away. So that results in decrease in testosterone production. Cortisol going up, testosterone going down. So going back to your question, when the sleep decreases, especially chronically, you have chronic elevation of the cortisol. That means you have chronic decline in your testosterone level.
So another spiritual aspect of this is, we are called to, in our faiths, to pursue God and to seek Him and draw close to Him and to pursue a relationship with Him.
Mm-hmm.
Testosterone can be related to that. If we're losing our fuel tank, if we're losing that source of desire for the ultimate good, or that direction, declining testosterone can affect that.
Mm-hmm.
It could be in a feeling of just loneliness, a feeling of isolation, a lack of motivation, maybe even just despair.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am my problem that I'm experiencing.
Right.
And so I kind of lose that spiritual connection by misidentifying myself. And I think also with testosterone comes this desire, like, yes, I can handle this. There's like a felt capacity that's missing as well. And so like a reduced, even a sense of ability that is there as well. And I have another question in regards to testosterone. What about women? They're not completely testosterone free. Am I right?
Right. So
Okay.
every woman have testosterone production. The testosterone comes both from ovaries, also adrenal glands. So in women, about 50% of it comes from the gonads and 50% comes from the adrenal glands.
Okay, so how would we relate what we're just talking about men? How would we relate that to women? Because is estrogen playing the same role as testosterone for women that testosterone is playing for men in this motivation and capacity and connection?
Actually, it's an excellent question. So we are learning more and more how important the testosterone is in women, because I just had a webinar about premenopause and menopause. So one of the changes that happens during that life transition for women is after menopause, we lose the source of testosterone. So the women not only lose their bone density because estrogen is low, they also start losing a lot of muscle mass. We used to think that women, like the society feeds the women, okay, just do aerobic exercises because you don't want to become masculine and have a lot of muscles. But this is just a myth, because women who are menopausal, they lose significant amount of the muscle because of the lack of testosterone. So we specifically encourage and prescribe weightlifting for women who are premenopausal and menopausal to use the leftover source of testosterone they have to build the muscle, so that prevents them from having significant injury when they fall. Because if even as older you get as a woman, there is increased risk of the fall and fracture as a result of the fall. And if you don't have a strength in your muscles, then the injury you get because of the fall is much more significant. So going back to your question, testosterone is very important in making muscles in women as well, and keeping the muscle mass. And at the menopause, that we lose 50% of our testosterone production as women. So it's very important to keep doing weightlifting and working on building muscles to use the testosterone that comes from our adrenal gland sources to keep building muscles.
So the declining testosterone is a cause for osteoporosis.
Osteoporosis mostly man, and also in women, because in women we use basically 3 hormones. Estrogen is the major one that helps with the making your bone mass as a female. Okay. So that is the major cause. We never kind of give a woman testosterone to make bones. But in men, that's a different story because
Yeah.
their major hormone is testosterone.
Oh, okay. It's interesting that the chemistry is different. So the loss of testosterone in men is adversely affecting bone density, but with women, it's the
Mostly the estrogen losses that's
yes,
causing
okay.
it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I tend to think we are two different species just made together because, I mean, and one of the things you're learning more and more, majority of medical studies have been done in men and then applied to women. And now we are learning more and more as more women are in medicine now, and as more women are in workforce, and as we actually live longer, we are learning more and more what we actually apply in men does not work for women because we have totally different chemistry. And so there are now more push toward actually doing studies focus on women and then applying in for women.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So spiritually speaking, one of the things that we are doing, and one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, is that, and I'm studying Maximus the Confessor, who was a 7th century Byzantine monk, Eastern Christianity, and his conception, and as an inheritor of early Christian theology, is that humanity is meant to integrate and combine and bring together, to unify all of creation. And you phrase it very well. Like maybe men and women are actually two different species. You know, we don't see that scripturally speaking, but there is this level of divide that Maximus the Confessor in spiritual theology recognizes, that there is this divide that needs to somehow be reunified again. And this is just one aspect of what he covers. So that's very interesting. The more there's a cliche phrase, the more you know, the more you grow, and the more you understand, I think the more you can kind of command and be in charge of and integrate in this way. So I think that's pretty fascinating. Yeah. We have a little bit more time left. If you want, we can either pause here, or those were basically all the questions that we had last time, you know, and then we have some of the questions that we did not get to that are in the sample questions, such as how do oxytocin and attachment hormones inform covenant and friendship and church life, faith community life, which is more for me. And then we have outrage and fear and stress hormones like cortisol, which is pretty important. And then
there was one question about shame, I remember.
Shame, yeah. We talked about that. That would have been, that's actually question number 10, so we might have touched on that a little bit in our conversation. So, and question 11 is dealing with shame as well. And so just number 13 and 12, so several questions are there. We might have already covered those in our conversation so far. So at this point, I'm going to be gone, you know, coming Friday. So the next episode or installment that we could do, if you're willing, is going to be at this point in April.
Sounds good.
So if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't want to take up. I don't want to monopolize your time on Sundays. You know, I don't want to, you know, abuse that.
That would be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we'll do another episode in April then.
Okay.
Sounds good. You want to stop the recording at this moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Stop.
Oh. That's how a referent does it.
Yeah.
The magic.
Stop. The beauty of technology is that you can clip the film off at the right moment.
Right.
And
perfect.
Edit out stuff like that.
Yeah. So then you have time to actually prepare your wings as well in the oil.
That is true.
Saturated oil.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, I'm just also curious, you know, to ask one final question, and that would be, this may not be in the video or not, but as we're having this conversation, like what's going through your mind in terms of like this conversation between endocrinology and theology? How is this sort of like helping you to form, renewed or new thoughts and new directions in your own practice?
To me, honestly, because Jeremy, I've always, because I'm a spiritual person myself, so I've always incorporated a lot of what you're saying in my practice, and as well as I keep learning. I think that's why they call it practice of medicine. I keep learning and seeing how can I use this information to serve patients better. So I would say majority of things that I heard from you, it's just reaffirmed what I'm doing, which is fascinating. I'm happy about that. Yeah. I'm proud of myself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I could just ask, like, how are you clinically working now? And
so
what's that look like for you?
I did a webinar, Jeremy, Friday night, to recruit some more patients. And I put the focus now mostly on premenopause and menopause.
Okay.
Because I am going through premenopause myself, and it's a very fascinating journey. So I guess you, in different stages of life, you get fascinated on, especially if it is a problem that you're experiencing, I think can serve people more. And my license renewal is coming up and in December. And I also talked to some colleagues about other works that I can do that not necessarily be direct patient care. So if I have another episode of depression, there wouldn't be interruption in their care. If.
Okay,
good. Yeah. I always, whenever I have talk with God, I think this is a journey for me that He is trying to teach me something that I'm not doing right. I always see the different experiences in life as a teaching point that God gives me. And I think during the process of my depression experience, I have learned so much about myself that probably I would not learn unless I would hit this hard with the depression. So I am looking into seeing, I talked to my program director from fellowship as well, and he was very supportive of for the next year or so, try to do like more consulting work. The consulting means I can actually consult the physicians only without necessarily seeing the patient. So they basically just give me the chart of the patient to review. I write my consultation, they deliver it to their patient. So that would be, I continue to do the clinical practice, and I don't necessarily need to be in charge of the patient directly. So that seems to be the direction I'm going. And few patients I would have just as my own patient, the one that don't necessarily need my presence all the time.
Mm-hmm. And so your license is up for renewal, but that's not the same as your board certification.
No, that's different.
I'm just curious, what's involved in renewing that? Because Stephen mentioned...
the board certification, you need to actually go to Harrisburg for a full day, sit down for 10 hours and take a test.
Fun.
Very fun. And it is only basically, I wanted to renew my board last year, but I have a friend, Ahmed. He said, why are you renewing your board again, Nargess? Because it's an excellent question. I said, I just don't know. I've always done that. He said, you don't need it. Unless you work for a big institution, it's just I would say it's just an extra title. It doesn't add anything, and you pay $2,000 for it. So it doesn't. So I am what now they call board eligible, meaning I have everything. It's just a matter of sitting for it. So a lot of the companies, if that they want to hire you, they ask you to be either board certified or board eligible. So I am board eligible, meaning it lapsed my board and I haven't renewed it. So I was thinking maybe this November I would sit for it, because it comes once a year as well.
Okay.
So it's like, and last November I was depressed. So I actually registered for it, but I just couldn't see myself driving. It was November 2nd. I couldn't see myself driving there, sitting for 10 hours and taking the test. So I canceled it, but I've already paid for it. Maybe this November, God willing, I would sit for it.
Yeah. Well, when you and I were at Panera, I said, hey, the plans for a holistic clinic, they're not gone. They're just delayed, on pause.
Yeah.
So there's,
I
have hope.
Yeah.
I have hope that this is something that you'll be ready to move towards and this sort of thing. And I'm still working towards that as well. And I've picked up a program that my friend Jeff, who's finished with his doctorate degree, he did a mental health coaching thing as well, and so I've started doing that, and it's just watch videos and you have to take a test, to get a certification, and so that can bring more legitimacy, to what I can offer as well. So I think it's the long game.
It is a long game.
It's the marathon. So
yeah. And I was actually reflecting, Jim. I mean, I really, really value your presence in my life. I think, I always believed God always provided what I needed. And like me being your next door neighbor, like I have never rented a place since 2012, and it was just like becoming a renter place and just next to you. I really think this is really God's telling me there are safe, and I've already talked to you about how I haven't had many safe men in my lifetime. You have kind of played that role of being the safe, reliable man that I have always knew. There are some of them there. I just never met. And I think it's because of this depression was like, I would never actually probably interact with you if it wasn't to ask for your help. You know what I mean? Like I was desperate that day, and you just, the way you actually, when you open the door, the first question you ask is, are you okay?
Are you okay?
And that was the perfect question. It was just because I was entertained to even ask you, and I asked my friend Elizabeth, and she said it would be so weird to go knock on somebody's door and ask. And I guess I just took the courage to say, okay, let me just ask. It's not gonna decline, and it was just the perfect moment. So to me, my depression is a journey that God has put as a chapter in my life, and I know at some point this journey would finish. It's just a matter of when, and I think how I would be strong enough. I don't believe that depression is a disease. I think depression is a constellation of symptoms that presents because of the experiences you have had in life.
Right.
And for everybody is a different, journey.
No.
Yeah.
No. I was talking with my friend Jeff, who's presenting at the men's retreat that's happening. We just had another person sign up just this weekend. So now there's 14 guys at the moment that are going to be there, and there's space for more.
How are you hoping? How many you're hoping to get?
So 23 is the total that we can have. We might be able to do 25.
And last time, how many you had?
This will be the first time. This is the first.
Oh, you didn't
retreat.
have a retreat? I thought you had another retreat. You went.
No.
I thought last year you went to a trip with friends.
I did, but this is
different.
This is the first retreat with Icons for Gospel. So we're doing that. So anyway, I was talking with one of the persons who's going to be presenting, and he was having an issue with one of his church members. He's a pastor, and he was just kind of like getting involved and like making it bigger than it really was. And I said, you know what? I've been learning over the last year or two just to stay in my lane and not to get diverted and distracted, and all these, to stay focused and stay in my lane. And we talked about that, and he found it very encouraging and very helpful. And he's texted me several times, but I even posted on Substack. What was it, Friday, I think? I did a post called externally manipulated, internally fragmented, something like that. Where it was like people kind of have unhealthy influences on us to really they take our ownership of ourselves when we give it to them. So he responded on that and said it was really good. But I'm doing this animal theology discussion as well. And
so that's the